Are you a jack of all trades? Maybe you should be a master of just one. Let's talk about it with Jordan Raynor on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
And we are so glad you're here. You always have a place at our table. I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Our favorite mega church pastor, Zach Van Dyke, is here. Zach isn't an Uber driver, but he does drive around the whole... How many kids at last count?
I didn't know where that was going. 6?
Or do you know what's causing this?
I mean, Valentine's just happened, so who knows? Seven might be coming.
You should get him to pay you a fare when you take care of him around.
Matthew Porter's with us. Matthew's wife and kids are getting over being sick. Probably not the coronavirus.
Probably.
You never know.
We'll
we could all die before this program is over.
You're all infected.
And then our producer, Jinx, is working hard in the little glass booth.
Wait a minute. Did you say you had some Corona? Look, I'm busy in here, man.
You know, if you...
I deserve extra applause, and I'm
That's
taking
it? That was all his introduction was? He's working in the little glass booth?
This is a team effort.
Okay,
This
whatever.
is tag team.
All right.
Our video director and IT guy, John, have you tried turning it off and on again? Myers is in the tech bunker.
I do want to know why that works. Like, when my internet goes down, it seems silly that you just unplug it and plug it. Like, that just... Anyway.
I'm just thankful for the easy solution.
Why do you go to sleep at night? So you can reboot.
Right.
And Dr. George...
Got deep.
Good idea. Dr.
That's
George
assuming you take your
Bingham...
boots off when you go to bed.
Yeah, there we go.
Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. George wants you to know Key Life accepts donations in the form of checks and credit cards and gold dust, Bitcom, commemorative plates,
I think it's
Well,
the Franklin Mint,
in honor-
and even from the entrepreneur, Jordan Raynor. We ought to hit him up before this program's
Well,
over.
in honor of the book, we could say that we also take MasterCard.
I see what
That's
you did
that's
there.
a good one.
bad.
Master of one. Oh.
Matthew, you better watch out.
Yeah, I'm
Joke
serious.
writer in the wings over there.
Serious.
might not have a job.
And Kathy Wyatt is, of course, the soft feminine side of the program. Every year, Kathy has a Valentine's Day tea party. And in an act of great generosity, she does not invite us.
That's right. Although I did get a very nice invitation via text on Saturday in the middle of the party with all the mothers and the daughters from Mr. and Dr. and Mrs. Brown saying, would you like to join, very last minute, would you like to join us for dinner? And we're going to a concert at a local church. And I said, thank you so much for the invitation, but I have 3 moms and 6 little girls here. Would you like to come by? And I got back, I think not. And I said, no surprise there.
Hey, listen, Jordan Raynor is the author. He's, first of all, a Presbyterian missionary to Baptist. He's an author, a serial entrepreneur, and executive chairman of Threshold 360. He's spoken at Harvard University, South by Southwest, and TED. Jordan has twice been selected as Google Fellow and served in the White House under President George Bush. Jordan's previous book, Called to Create, was a national bestseller, and his new book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is Master of One. Find and focus on the work you were created to do. Jordan, if I do that, will I get rich like you?
I don't know about that, but I think for the Christian, that's not the point, Steve. As I talk about in the book, I think the purpose of work is the purpose of life, right? Which is to glorify God and love our neighbors as ourselves. And I think that's why we should care about excellence. I think that's why we should always be searching for strategies to do our most exceptional work, because it's a means of glorifying God and loving others.
It's part of our worship. You have lauded work, and as you should, biblically, but we live in a culture where work is no longer a place of definition and excellence and worship. We've gone down some bad roads, haven't we?
I think so. I've had some people ask me, why should Christians care about excellence in our work? And I think you've got to go back and
Oh, man. Talking about excellence.
My bad.
Oops.
No, it wasn't
we
your
lost
bad.
him?
Got to
It
replace
was-
the batteries.
It was
dear.
We're getting
God.
back. We're getting
Okay.
back.
God was upset with us talking about excellence. And because God loved us, he put a glitch, a demon, if you will,
You don't
in
think
the wiring of this program.
you don't think God thought we were bragging about being excellent, do you?
I don't know that we've
could,
ever
man.
done that.
Not
have we?
much
I
risk
don't
of
think
that.
so
No.
either, but
Gosh.
That hasn't been.
He's going after the
our
wrong radio show.
Zach, I think it's your fault. You said before you even got here everything went wrong today.
I've 3 things have gone wrong already today, and now
this is 4.
the 4. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Thought it was us.
But this also could be Matthew masterminded this because we're having to reboot the
There you
show,
go.
and
There you go.
and the reboot was in the promo. I mean, in the intro. Did you?
It's all coming
We
together.
are dragging that joke all the way out.
all the way out.
just.
But
Did
but
you
listen,
do that on purpose? Did
Yeah.
you have a
Yes.
premonition or
yeah,
something?
it's I can't explain it.
Oh my
hey
goodness.
folks, be patient. We do.
We're making
have,
sure he still wants to talk to us.
We have excellent people in the glass booth, and they're contacting him,
Yeah.
and we will
In an
reboot.
excellent
We've
way.
often wondered if
Cyber
guests
attacks.
want to hang up after our intro, and they just never do. Maybe this was his way of graciously getting out of the
Yeah,
interview.
starting a little
He was like,
static.
I
and-
can't.
He finally
I
had
Can't
the
do this.
he had the
I'm
gumption.
going through a tunnel. Can't hear y'all. Like,
Yeah. Sort of like you do with your headphone. You're talking to somebody about having Timmy, sing in front of the church.
Right.
No, he wouldn't do that to us because he's a Christian.
Yeah, but we did have
And
one.
Christians don't do things.
We did
like
have
that.
one guy one time that hung up on us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we hung up on one too.
Yeah, that was true.
That was the worst interview we ever did.
At least we don't have a
find it.
we don't have a track
life.org.
record. It's only happened a couple times.
We didn't hang up on him. We ended the first segment, and Steve just said, "Well, thank you for being on the show."
It was a smooth
We still had
transition.
4 segments.
I can still hear the intro music.
Oh, George,
Well, listen.
please don't be like that. Please.
We've got
This is training for us.
Please
the next
come back,
time
Jordan.
this happens, we'll act like it was planned.
That's
and
right.
we will seem to be excellent.
In an excellent way.
And
Yes.
our guest then will praise us as an example in his next book.
There you
of
go.
Excellence. That works for me.
I would prefer not to be a cautionary tale, given the choice.
Yeah, right.
You don't always get the choice.
Well, I sure
So
hope.
how's it coming in there, guys? What do you
I think we're close.
You-
John, how we doing back here?
You think maybe we might actually
I'm
have
back.
Oh,
There we
Yay.
go.
All right.
let me give you the question again. The question is this: we live in a culture where work is not lauded, and even in the church, it's not held up as something that's good.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve. I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of us in the church and in the broader world have forgotten that work is worship. I think we view work as a meaningless means to an end. We go to work to collect a paycheck and move on to the truly meaningful things in life. But that is not at all the biblical picture of work. I find it fascinating personally that the Bible is the only religious text that says that God himself worked. Every other religion says that the gods created human beings to work and serve the gods. Only Christianity says that God himself created and was productive and worked. And then he created us in his image and called us to fill the earth through our work. So work is not meaningless. It's one of the most meaningful things we do because when we do it, we have an opportunity to glorify God. And if that's true, I think we ought to have really high standards for excellence in our work, right? The opposite of mastery, I like to say in the book, the opposite of mastery is mediocrity. And mediocrity is a failure of love of our neighbor and a misrepresentation of our Father, whose image we are called to bear to the world.
So good. You know, you don't hear very much in Christian circles. You hear it from motivational speakers, but they don't have the gasoline. But we
That's
ought, we
exactly
ought to
right.
be able to do this. This ought to be the subject of sermons, shouldn't it? And teaching in seminaries and colleges that are Christian.
I'm making it my life's work to help move that along, Steve. Hopefully, you guys can help me.
I'd just like to say, when he said, God put us in here and said, work and fill the earth, I am doing my job. That's all I just...
You get a gold star.
Zach, there are some limits to this.
We're called to create and procreate.
There you go,
He
Zach.
puts the pro in procreation.
Once again,
Now you have
Zach
to work
goes
extra hard to
to
pay
the
for
head
it.
of the class.
That's right.
What kind of you talk to a lot of people in putting this book together. What kind of reactions do you get to the kind of things you talk about?
Yeah, it's funny. So we went out and we interviewed about 25 world-class Christians who are masters of their crafts. Talked to Tony Dungy, the NFL Hall of Fame coach. Talked to Mr. Rogers, his biographer. Talked to Emily Lay, a bunch of others. And the reaction...
Hey, wait. Hold it just a second, Jordan. We're going
You just wound him up.
Listen,
wind
we'll
him up
get
and then
this right.
break him.
We're going to make that a teaser, and we're going to return. And if you go anywhere, you're crazy. And if anybody asks you what you're doing, you say, leave me
don't know.
alone. I'm listening and watching Steve Brown, etc. And then let your peacock feathers fly in the breeze and say, and you're not? I thought everybody did. Guys, like Jesus, we're coming back. You're listening to Steve Brown, etc., Place of Excellence. And we're talking with Jordan Raynor. His book is Master of One, Find and Focus on the Work You Were Created to Do.
Jordan, I'm afraid to read your book.
I was afraid to write it.
Okay, well, I just have to tell you, I'm afraid to read it because it's, the subtitle or whatever, find and focus on the work you were created to do. And at my age, if I discover that the work that I've been doing is not all these years is not what I was created to do, I'm in deep trouble.
You are doing what God created.
I asked Jordan.
Jordan doesn't know you, but I do.
That is the best sign, right? So I talk a lot about this in the book. If work is service, then to find the work that we were quote unquote created to do, the best people to ask are those we serve, right? Those we work with, those we work for. It's giftedness that we're after primarily, not necessarily short-term passions and happiness. The other thing I'll say is, I think one of the myths I hope to debunk in the book is that there's this magical one thing. There's only one thing on earth that we could possibly do to glorify God and love others through our careers. I just don't think that's true. I think we treat career almost like Hollywood treats the mythical Mr. Right, as if there's one soulmate on the face of the planet that we could spend our lives with. And the reality is, I think there are lots of things that any of us could do really exceptionally well vocationally in service of God's glory and the good of others. So there's no Mr. Right, but there is a Mr. Best, right? And so the book outlines a strategy for identifying what the best thing is for you to commit to mastering vocationally within this particular season of your life.
Huh.
It's really hard for somebody that is multi-talented and multi-gifted to light in one place, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. So one of the things we talk about in the book is the difference between your one thing being super specific and being really broad, right? So I think C.S. Lewis is a really good example of this. On the surface, Lewis looks like he was a master of many things, right? So he was an exceptional writer of fiction and nonfiction. He was a fantastic teacher at Magdalen College in Oxford. He was a great radio broadcaster, not much unlike Steve Brown, right? So, he was good at a lot of different things. And so I was talking with his stepson in an interview for the book, and I was like, "Hey, was Lewis a master of many things?" He said, "Absolutely not. He very much saw all of his vocational pursuits as an expression of one very broad thing, which was teaching. He was a masterful teacher in everything that he did. That was the thing that he was pursuing mastery of. He just happened to apply it in a couple of different contexts. And I should think most people's one thing is broad. Yours might be communication. Mine, for example, is entrepreneurship. So whether I am leading a tech software product to market or bringing books or my podcast or something like that to market, it's still, from my perspective, the same, multiple expressions of the same one thing, which for me, again, is entrepreneurship. So that was like very freeing. And if you read some of the reviews from some of the early readers of the book, I think they find that concept of a broad one thing very freeing, but also at the same time, that takes a lot of other things off the table, right? And it allows you to focus more intensely on the work that you believe God created you to do in this season of your career.
Jordan, what can you just you use a outline process of steps? Could you just kind of summarize that and give us an overview?
Yeah, so this came from the 25 or so interviews we did throughout the course of the book. And basically, there's what I see as a 4-step path to mastery. Step 1 is explore. So before you commit to being a master of one, you should be a jack or Jill of all trades. You should try a bunch of different things to figure out what you're good at. Right? I think we ask young people to choose their one thing way too early in life. So that's step 1 is explore. Step 2 is choose. Once you've gotten enough data and feel like you know directionally what you can be most exceptional at in your career, commit to it and decide to pursue mastery of it over some significant period of time. Step 3 is eliminate. Once you know what you're saying yes to, eliminate everything else that might be distracting you from mastering that one thing. And then step 4, it's a little unfair to call it a step because it's really a lifelong process of mastery, of digging into what I outlined in the book as the 3 keys to mastering anything vocationally and just continuing to raise the bar to get better and better at your craft because you believe your work is eternally significant.
Jordan, you alluded to some of the bad advice that kind of gets in a well-intended way passed around. There's several of them. Follow your bliss, the Joseph Campbell thing. Can you talk about, deconstruct those a little bit for us and why they're more problematic than we sometimes realize?
Yeah, so I think there's some lies that really kill us from focusing on the work that we were created to do. Number 1, you could be anything you want to be. That's a lie. Number 2, you can do everything you want to do. And the third one, which I really attack head on, is your happiness is the primary purpose of work. Now, I'm a millennial. I grew up with my parents telling me, follow your passions, follow your dreams, do whatever makes you happy in your career. Zach is laughing. It sounds like he got some of the same advice.
I'm right on the cusp of the millennials. So yeah, I get it.
And I don't think it's just millennials, right? This is like garbage advice, and we need to start calling it out as such, right? Put simply, it doesn't work. Millennials have had more opportunity to, quote, do whatever makes us happy vocationally. And Gallup tells us that we are the least happy generation at work of all time. Right. In the book, I talk about a couple of academic studies that show why. Right. The number one predictor of somebody describing their work as a calling as opposed to a career or a job is not whether or not they were passionate about the work before they started it. It's the number of years they have spent practicing the craft. Passion is a side effect of mastery. You get to love what you do by getting really good at it, which I don't think should come as a huge surprise to Christians who are called to follow and model our lives after Jesus, who came not to be served, but to serve.
So, I mean, excellence is such an important thing in your book, and you make a point of why there's some biblical basis for pursuing that. So, what do you say to like the church that's like, but Timmy just loves to sing in front of the church, and we all can't stand when Timmy can't. We hate when Timmy sings, but he has a passion for it, and like so. How do you draw the line as far as allowing space for people to explore and find out that they're not really good at something, and then perpetuating those lies?
That's a great question. I'll start the answer. We might have to pick it up after the break. But you want the church answer or the real brutal?
I'll nip it in the bud.
I want the real answer.
Yeah, it's got to be Jesus. Somehow.
That's exactly right. Well, I'll tease the answer with this. I think the church obviously has to make space for us to learn and to grow, and I'll answer the rest of it when we come back from the break. But no, I mean we've got to have space to explore and to experiment, and the church can be a great place to do it. But if Timmy is singing and he's not getting any better, and the church is plugging their ears, then I would argue Timmy isn't serving others through his work. Timmy may be passionate about singing, but he's searching himself and his passions, and Timmy probably needs to sit down.
I'm not even sure you're saved.
As long as he's right.
The book is a great book. Master of One, find and focus on the work you were created to do. We were created to take a break, have some milk and cookies, rest up, and then, like Jesus, we'll return. We're so glad you're with us. You're listening to Steve Brown, etc. And we're talking to Jordan Raynor, and his book is called Master of One, Find and Focus on the Work You Were Created to Do. And by the way, if you don't have his other book, Called to Create, you ought to get that too. Both books are companion pieces that reach out to a place where people of faith ought to be, excellence and entrepreneurship and shining for Jesus and things like that. All right, Timmy can't sing, but you know he's got a passion for it, and you were commenting on that.
And his parents, are tithers.
Does Timmy tithe? Yeah.
Let me give more context to this hypothetical story.
And it's even worse if Jack can't preach.
Yeah. Timmy's father's an elder.
I'll land the Timmy plane quickly just to wrap up what I was saying. Listen, we've seen this a lot in the church, right? Where somebody's really passionate about something and we think that means that, well, that's what they were created to do. Well, God all throughout Scripture shows us his character of excellence. We're called to imitate that. So yeah, we should have people exploring their vocational interests. But again, I mentioned this a few minutes ago. Our happiness is not the purpose of work. The primary purpose of work is the glory of God and service of others. That's why we should demand excellence. So if Timmy wants to sing, great. He should sing. He should try it out. But if Timmy is making zero progress in his career as a vocalist over time and deliberate practice, Timmy's got to do something else. If he cares about excellence and if he cares about serving others well, the problem is so few people in the church care because there's some disconnect between excellence and our work serving the world. That's the connection that we got to make for people. And once you make that connection and help them understand that their work is eternally significant, of course we will care about excellence.
Yeah. Well, and I think another thing as Christians too, sometimes we also have a culture where if it's a good thing or it could be a good idea, saying no, like we just have a hard time saying no to good things, right? And you kind of have to do that if you're gonna.
We have a really hard time saying no to good things in order to focus on the best things. Mm-hmm. And in the book, I talk about. I actually think Jesus is a really good example.
Do we lose him? Yeah. Maybe that's all he needs.
Well,
to
that's
say.
not a bad way to. We'll get him back. Jesus is a good example. You want to discuss that? Theologically and metaphysically.
He drove out demons from the man at the synagogue. Then he went over to Peter's mother-in-law's house, healed her. Not sure if Peter was okay with that, but healed Peter's mother-in-law. And then all the people from the town came to Peter's mother-in-law's house, and Jesus healed a lot of them, right? So everyone goes to bed, and the next day, everybody wakes up. Jesus, like he always is by himself. And the disciples come up to him like, Jesus, where are you? Everybody's looking for you. They want an encore of healing on day 2. And Jesus says in Mark 1:38, let us go somewhere else so I can preach there also. That is why I have come. So Jesus is saying no to healing people, we would all agree a good thing,
Right.
because he didn't come just to heal and reveal his identity. His essential mission was to preach the gospel in word and deed, ultimately on the cross. So that was his quote unquote, one thing, if you will. And because he was clear on his purpose, because he was clear on what he was saying yes to, the work the Father gave him to do, that forced him into a habit of saying no to good but non-essential things that were competing for his time and attention. And man, if Jesus can't say yes to everything, neither can we. We've got to get in the habit of saying no to good things in order to focus on the work that God created us to do.
Actually, in Matthew 12, where somebody asked Jesus to go somewhere, and his mother's looking for him, his brothers, and he says, "Who is my mother?" Just kind of a shocking kind of thing, but if you have a very clear sense of what your purpose is, it certainly does create the clarity to say no to this or yes to that. We're talking about excellence. It's interesting. The world sees excellence in this striving for excellence, I think, as far as financial success and notoriety and everything. I think believers sometimes feel a different kind of pressure for success and excellence. Jordan's written about it, this need to give back. And it can kind of sometimes become this onerous thing of like, I feel like I have a destiny. I've not accomplished this yet.
Yeah.
I'm failing. Because I know
Like the kingdom of God is resting on my shoulders, like getting this right.
I have been given like everything. I should be dadgum Jonas Salk out here, and I'm not. And you're like, well, so it's like this different kind of defeating mentality of feeling we're striving for excellence,
Their preachers take advantage of that feeling. That feeling's a lot more general than you think in the church. And preachers who want to build empires, to have power, to take up an offering, they play on that kind of thing.
Find a couple of those folks.
Oh, you really do. And you lean on it, and you lean on it hard, and then you have the ushers take up an offering. Man, you can double it if you play it right. And not that I've ever done that.
No,
I haven't.
I'm not speaking from experience.
That's the one sin I haven't done, but I can get that. I think I feel that.
So my solution is to find some of these schmoes and lean on them, and then I'll achieve excellence. I hear you, Steve.
You're really bad,
I'm
man.
taking notes over
I
here.
want you to know. Hey guys, we're gonna come back and talk to Jordan. We got some really good stuff coming up, and you don't want to miss a bit of it. By the way, this would be a great study for your Bible study or small group. The book is Master of One. Find and focus on the work you were created to do. And you can get a copy of this by going to our website, keylife.org. Hey guys, don't go away. We really are coming back. Jordan Raynor is our guest, and his book is Master of One. Find and focus on the work you were created to do. I'd like to kind of put you into this conversation about grace. There are people in the church who aren't good at anything and who've tried and failed and been marginalized and put down and intimidated. And your message to them is not one of joy and an invitation to excellence, but a scary place. Talk about Jesus' love and grace and how that works in this.
Man, that's a great question, Steve. I'll say two things about this. So number one, I think we as Christians are called to the pursuit of excellence. I don't think we are called to necessarily attaining it, and certainly never attaining perfection, right? I see no biblical evidence for Jesus commanding any sort of results from our lives, right? The results that we need in this lifetime were secured by Jesus Christ on the cross, and ultimately that's all that matters, and gives us great grace in everything that we do. Here's the second thing I'll say. I do think there are a lot of people out there who have yet to find, and I'll stress the word yet, to find work that they can do with excellence. But that doesn't mean that we keep trying. We got to remember, sin made work difficult and arduous. It is not easy. What I'm outlining in this book is not easy. That's not a great thing to say if you want to sell books, right? But it's not. Finding work that you can be masterful at in service of others takes work, takes grit, takes discipline. And not everybody's going to find it, right? I'm hoping, I'm praying that the book makes it as easy as possible for you. But there will be failure along the way. There's been failure in my story. And all along the way, there is grace, but all along the way, I kept trying by the grace of God, right? I think my sin nature a lot of times would want me to cave in and just give up and accept mediocrity. But I think we Christians are called to more. I think we're called to experiment and try and try and try again until we find work that starts to produce fruit that is clearly being brought about by the Holy Spirit of God.
His love kind of makes it possible to risk that way, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. I mean, my last book called The Create, the subtitle is A Biblical Invitation to Create, Innovate, and Risk. And one of the core messages of that book is it is the gospel of Jesus Christ that should make Christians the boldest people on the planet. Whether you're entrepreneurs or radio broadcasters, we can risk a lot professionally because at the end of the day, we recognize that our status is secure as children of God, no matter what we do, no matter what we produce vocationally, even if we never make a dent in our careers, we are equally valuable in the eyes of God through Jesus Christ.
I've got a question about with this pursuit of excellence, and if you get to a place where you feel pretty good, like I'm in the right lane. I'm feeling confident in how God's created me, and I'm seeing how it's serving others. How do you live in the tension of getting really good at something and also being humble and the character trait of humility being so core to who Jesus is and who He's called us to be as believers?
Yeah. So what's funny about that, Zach? Out of all the interviews that we conducted for the book on like what it looks like for somebody to be world class at what they do, humility was the defining trait of all of these masters. I actually don't think you can get world class without a healthy dose of humility. There's certainly exceptions to that rule, right? But in the book, I outlined 3 keys to mastering anything vocationally. Number 1 is purposeful practice, right? Number 2 is discipline over time. And number 3 is apprenticeships, and not just a one-time apprenticeship, but this lifelong discipline of humbly recognizing that you don't know everything. And there are always, always, always going to be people smarter than you and better than you in your field, and submitting to their authority so that you can get better at your craft. So I think humility is an essential component to this. I mentioned purposeful practice. One of the components of purposeful practice is this idea of frequent discomfort. So masters never settle, right? Masters are always putting more weight on the bar. They're never satisfied with where they're at because they recognize there's more to go and further to grow in their career. So I think humility is the defining characteristic of the world's most masterful people.
Jordan,
and God kind of builds that into the system, doesn't He?
Yeah,
I think so. Right. I think humility is rewarded in our vocational systems, and I do think that's part of God's design. Obviously, that's broken and imperfect because of sin, but I absolutely think that's imprinted by God.
That ends up kind of answering something I was thinking of, because it often, it seems like it's easy to get so focused on what you're trying to do, you forget the thing you're trying to do, like watching your feet when you're trying to dance. And at some point, you just need to stop thinking about that, or stop focusing on yourself. And
That's good.
And humility ends up being, I've heard the definition, it's not thinking less of yourself. It's like not thinking of yourself at all.
Yeah, this is what Paul talks about, right? It's the freedom of self-forgetfulness. It's not, we don't have self-esteem problems as secular media would lead us to believe. It's not an issue of low self-esteem or too high self-esteem. We just need to think about ourselves less. I think that's the essence of humility. Tim Keller's written a fantastic little mini book on this called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness that I reread probably every 6 months because I have to remind myself of this, because I think it's, in our culture where everything is about me and my happiness and my fame and my fortune. I think we got to remember, be intentional about forgetting ourselves in service of others.
Of all the masters you interviewed, tell us a couple of them. And we don't have a lot of time, but tell us a couple of your favorites.
Yeah, I'll leave you with one since we don't have that much time. I did not grow up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I don't know why. I was born in 1986. I feel like everybody my age watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on a daily basis. But a couple of years ago, I saw the documentary that was released on him in 2018. I then read the first full-length biography on Rogers. We actually just had his biographer on my podcast. And Mr. Rogers just instantly became one of my great heroes of all time. I mean, talk about humility. This is a guy who was world class at what he did, but never felt fully confident that he was equipped to do the work that he was doing, even at the late years of that show. And his story is just a great example of the path to mastery. He started out with tons of different interests. There were tons of things he wanted to do with his career, but it's a story of placing a bunch of little bets, experimenting your career, submitting yourself humbly to mentors as an apprenticeship. It's just a beautiful story, and it's all driven by Fred's deep sense of service that was driven by his faith. That's one thing the biography makes clear. He was driven by a desire to serve others through his work, and that's really the theme of Master of One.
Again, guys, the title of it, and by the way, Jordan, it's been fun having you on.
Oh, it's been a blast.
A lot of our guests stand like deer in the headlights, and you jumped right in. The name of the book is Master of One. Find and focus on the work you were created to do. And incidentally, this is a life-changing book. It could really make a major difference in the places you go and what you do and who you do it for. Again, Jordan Raynor, Master of One. Find and focus on the work you were created to do. Jordan, thanks for spending some time with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Guys, we're going to come back and tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. So don't go anyplace. That was a great hour, and I really enjoyed. When I looked at the book and I spent some time with it this morning, I kind of winced. It sounded kind of like, a motivational speech and, change the world, make a difference, make your life count. Don't waste your life. The world's going to hell and you don't care, so do something and do it yesterday kind of thing. And frankly, I'm just tired of that. I'm tired of that kind of thing. And I thought, I don't know if I can go through an hour, but that's not where Jordan's coming from. I mean, the guy gets it. And, one of the dangers of teaching grace is that people will take advantage of it, but not in the way you think, not by sinning. That's okay. No, it's not okay, but I'm not talking about that kind of take advantage. What they'll do is just lay back and say it doesn't matter. I'm loved and accepted. I don't have to work hard. I don't have to be kind. I don't have to reach out to others. I don't have to show excellence. And that's not what grace does. Grace presupposes that you're going to screw it up and then provides a safety net so you can get on the trapeze and do flips. Otherwise, you would sit on the floor and say, I'm not doing that. And I just love the way Jordan brought those things together and pointed to excellence as an important place for Christians to be. All right. Who's going to be with us next week?
Next week, we're going to talk with Rusty Wright. And Rusty's spent most of his life in the field of evangelism. And he's got some really interesting, ways that he approaches spending time with people and sharing faith with them, and very sensitive to where people are and not beating them over the head. And that
And,
kind of stuff.
we're going to talk to him some. Rusty's been my friend for 100 years. He's really an apologist for the Christian faith, but he's been through some hard stuff.
Right. Yep.
And so we're going to talk to him some about the hard stuff he's been through and how do you survive it when your marriage goes down the tube, when the people you trusted turn their backs on you, when it's just not working for excellence the way you wanted it to work. So that'll be a good program for next week. All right, guys. I feel like I've done.
You said it all.
Right, man. 10 programs. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's hard being excellent.
I know it's hard work. Hey guys, we're out of here.
And we're out of cookies.
But we'll be back next week, same time, same place. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide berth.